Hi again, it's Phil here from Revive My Ride. And in this video I'm going to show you how to clean battery terminals and remove battery terminal corrosion. And at the end of the video I've done a little bit of myth busting where I show why you should never apply copper grease to battery terminals before putting the clamp back on, so it's worth sticking around for that. Okay, so let's get straight into it. Why is the connection at your battery terminals and clamps so important? Well, the reason is, this is the way that the power from your battery gets to your car. So many symptoms like a very slow engine starting, maybe it turns over but it never starts at all, or maybe when you turn the key it clicks, or even things like headlights that are too dim. This can all be because the power is not being transferred from your battery to your car. Also, you can start along a long road of changing the battery when actually your original one's good, so you're spending money. But also trying to charge it, and if you connect the charger to the battery clamps and there's a poor connection into the battery, actually you're not charging the battery at all. So that's why I say always start at the battery terminals and clamps, make sure they're clean, make sure you have a good connection, and then you can take it from there. Usually the battery can be found under the bonnet or hood of the car in the engine bay. So often the battery is under a cover as well to protect it from the weather, so you just need to lift that up and there it is. Increasingly though, batteries are found in the boot or trunk of the car as well, and if it is there then you'll find it under a piece of trim like this. If your battery terminal looks like this, then this is definitely your problem, but to be honest it doesn't take anywhere near this level of corrosion to give you a starting problem, but this gives you an idea what to look for. At this point it's worth mentioning that if you're cleaning up battery terminals then you should wear nitrile gloves and also some safety glasses. The reason is that deposits like this here can be corrosive. Okay, we're going to use this sandpaper to clean up the battery terminals, and the first thing we need to do is undo the negative clamp and remove it from the battery. Now we can go ahead and use the sandpaper to clean up the terminal, and you'll know you've got it right when you can see that it's coming up nice and shiny, but don't take off any more material than you need to though. With the terminal clean, you can now use the same piece of sandpaper to clean the inside of the clamp and bring that up nice and shiny and clean too. Now you can use a spray like electrical or brake cleaner and spray the terminal and wipe it down with a cloth, and that will remove any dust or grease residue that remains. And just do the same for the battery terminal as well. So now we can move on to the positive terminal, and actually you can see now why we disconnected the negative one first, because with the negative lead disconnected from the battery, then it removes the risk of touching the spanner against a piece of metal, which would run the risk of short-circuiting the battery. So let's go ahead and loosen this clamp and remove it from the battery. Just like in this case, sometimes you might find it's a little bit difficult to get to the battery terminals to clean them up, and so you may want to consider either sliding the battery forward a little bit or removing it, and to do this you'll have to undo the battery clamp. So this battery is held down by a screw that you need to remove with an Allen key. So here I'm just using an Allen key to loosen it off and remove it, and then I can slide the battery out. With the battery slid forward, now it's a much easier job for me to get to that positive terminal and clean it up properly. Again, I'm using the sandpaper to clean up the battery terminal nice and shiny and clean, and then I'm using the sandpaper again to clean inside the clamp and get it the same. And again, just a little spray to clean up the terminal and the clamp. If you removed your battery earlier, now it's time to push it back in place so you can get it connected back up. Now we're ready to connect the battery back up, and the procedure is to connect the positive clamp back to the battery first, and then go ahead and fit the negative clamp back on the battery. Make sure the connections are tightened up snug, but don't over tighten them. And don't forget to clamp the battery back down again once you're finished. It's important that you never apply grease to the battery terminals before putting the clamps on, because it actually insulates the battery from the clamp. But once you've got it connected up like this, you can go ahead and apply some grease to the outside of the clamps and terminals to keep the moisture out. So here you can see I'm applying just a small amount of grease to the top of each of the battery terminals. There's a couple of options here. You can either use the copper grease or you can use a silicone based grease. At this point you know your connections are good, but if your battery is low you can go ahead and charge it up with the battery in place. Okay, so I can already hear a little bit of muttering at the back, and I'm not trying to stir up trouble. So people will be saying, well, there's copper in this grease, so it will be conductive and therefore it'll be great to use on battery terminals. But actually copper is a really good slip additive, so it's been put into this grease as a anti-friction material, not for its conductive properties. So I thought it might be fun to do a little experiment, so that I can, you know, show you why it shouldn't be used on battery terminals. So these are our two pieces of metal which represent the battery terminal and the clamp. And we're going to do similar to what we just did when we were cleaning up the clamps. So there's no point sanding these surfaces because there's no corrosion on them. But what I will do is, and you can use the electrical cleaner or you can use brake cleaner just to clean those surfaces. Maybe move that battery. Okay. And just for completeness, do the other side as well. And my bench gets a little clean as well for once, so that's nice. So I'm going to pop those on top of each other, and I'm going to leave them overlapping a little bit, and that's so that I can get my multimeter, which I'll just bring into shot there, and I'm going to set the multimeter to ohms, which is the resistance. And so now when I touch these two together, this will read the resistance. And what it's reading is the resistance of the just the leads themselves, which you can see is about 0.5 ohm, which is nothing really. So now if I touch these to these two pieces of metal, you can see it's pretty steady at only 0.2 of an ohm, which is very low resistance, which is what you would expect with two clean pieces of metal laid on top of each other. So now we've got our copper grease. So remember, one's the clamp, and I'm not going to go too crazy with this. You know, I'm not trying to put an inch thick of the stuff on there. Just a nice coating. Okay, so that represents the clamp, and this other one can represent the terminal. It's a messy job, but someone's got to do it. Okay, so that's those greased. And we've put the clamp onto the terminal, and if you want, just so that the lead has somewhere nice and clean to be attached to, then I'll just clean up that end there. Yeah, so let's see how we get on, huh? So touching that to the clean metal of our clamp representative and onto the clean metal of the terminal. And look at that, there's no connection. Not an ohm, not a kilo ohm, not a mega ohm. It's like it's a cut wire. The resistance is so high. So I hope that that's demonstrated that copper grease isn't conductive. Probably isn't the best choice to put on your batteries and terminals. But it can be really handy to put it on afterwards, so after you've already tightened up your nice clean clamp and terminal together, to protect moisture and corrosion getting into those.